Okay, let's dive in. Today we're taking a look at relationships, specifically through the lens of Michael Baisden's book, Do Men Know What They Want, Never Satisfied, Second Edition.
That's right. This deep dive is all about unpacking the key observations, insights, and perspectives presented within this specific source.
Right.
It's really a dive into the author's documented views on infidelity and, the complex dance between men and women.
And it draws from his own experience.
From his experiences, yeah.
That?
And also things shared through his nationally syndicated radio show and relationship seminars.
And it's particularly interesting because this edition came out, 17 years after the original?
Exactly, 17 years later.
Yep.
So it incorporates nearly 2 decades of lessons learned, his perspective evolving over time.
So we're getting more than just a snapshot.
Definitely. It's really looking at relationship dynamics as mapped out by this particular guide, with that added layer of hindsight from the author.
Okay, so the book kind of kicks off with a reference to Chris Rock's, let's say, blunt take. Men want food, sex, and silence. How does Baisden use that? Is it just a joke or...
He uses it as a simplified starting point, really.
Yeah.
The implication, as he lays it out, is that men's fundamental needs within a relationship are, well, in this view, relatively straightforward.
Straightforward meaning.
Meaning, if these basic needs, particularly, sexual availability and maybe a certain amount of, let's say, peace or lack of conflict, aren't consistently met at home, then from the perspective in the book, it provides a sort of fertile ground for some men to look elsewhere.
Ah, okay, so it feeds into that idea he brings up about men being fair weather lovers, looking for the easy path, maybe.
Exactly. That's how he frames it. And he pairs that with the pretty provocative thought that a man is only as faithful as his options.
Oof.
Yeah. He argues that for men in positions where they get a lot of attention, like athletes, actors, personalities, the sheer volume of opportunity can be, well, overwhelming.
So temptation is just scaled way up for them.
It's presented as a significant challenge to monogamy for what he calls the moral man in those high-demand circumstances.
But it's not just about physical temptation, right? Baisden also gets into the emotional side, the ego.
Absolutely. That's a big piece of it. He talks about men's egotistical needs, this fundamental desire for appreciation, for validation, feeling wanted.
And if they don't get that at home...
His view is that if that validation isn't consistently coming from the primary relationship, another woman providing that ego stroke can become a really powerful draw.
Okay, this is where it gets really complex in the book. He discusses men feeling trapped in committed relationships.
Right, even ones they might have pushed for initially.
Yeah, and then resorting to these elaborate lies to see other women. He calls it the escape.
Yes, it's a striking comparison he makes, likening it to Shawshank Redemption.
Wow.
Where the man feels like an inmate needing to break free from a warden, which is how the wife or girlfriend is sort of framed in this specific context.
So the relationship itself feels like a prison.
That's the idea he presents, that men who feel confined or suffocated will construct these complex deceptions just to maintain that ability to see other women on the side.
And his observation that honesty is often never an option for these men. He links that to lessons learned early on, or maybe not learned.
It's a pretty stark claim he makes there.
Yeah.
His perspective is that many men are, in his view, taught or maybe just conditioned to prioritize having sex without getting caught.
Right.
Rather than valuing open, honest communication about what they actually want, or maybe the struggles they're having in the relationship.
Digging a bit deeper, he suggests cheating often covers up something else, like a fundamental insecurity. He calls it the need for backup.
Yeah, backup. This connects back to what he sees as a need for control and, kind of paradoxically, a fear of really falling in love and risking getting hurt.
So having options keeps them safe, emotionally.
In his analysis, having that backup allows men to keep an emotional distance, avoiding the vulnerability that comes with, deep intimacy.
And he's quite direct about sexual expectations, too. The idea that some men feel they need absolute compliance sexually.
Oh, very direct. Yes, he states that the idea of sex being, rationed or put on a schedule is seen by some men, in his view, as just unacceptable.
Non-negotiable, basically?
Pretty much. If sexual availability isn't perceived as absolute and on-demand, he argues it can be the catalyst for seeking it elsewhere. He frames it as a non-negotiable need for these specific men he's describing.
Okay, and then finally, on the why, the book brings up this colder calculation.
That's right.
That some men actually weigh the costs of leaving the money, the emotional fallout, the kids, and decide that managing an affair is just, well, less complicated than blowing up their main life.
It's presented as a pragmatic, though obviously self-serving, perspective, a look into the alleged decision-making process some men go through when they're unhappy, but for whatever reason, unwilling to actually leave the relationship.
Okay, so if a man in the scenario Baisden paints decides he wants an ongoing affair, what kind of woman is he looking for? What are the criteria?
He lays out a pretty specific list in the book. First, he says she needs empathy and acceptance. She has to understand his situation.
Meaning his existing relationship.
Exactly. Understand it and accept it without trying to, rock the boat or cause drama. There's a rather pointed quote mentioned here. A piece of man is better than no man.
Wow, that's direct.
It is. He also emphasizes sexual adventurousness.
Okay.
He suggests these men look for women willing to be more experimental, maybe do things they feel they can't ask their primary partner to do, or are maybe afraid to ask.
And despite his own lack of commitment, the book says he expects loyalty from her.
Absolutely. The hypocrisy is highlighted. The cheating man, as described here, often requires the other woman to be available 204/7 and completely loyal to him.
She can't run the streets, as he puts it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Even while he clearly is.
Baisden then categorizes these women the vamp and the tramp. Can you break those down based on his descriptions?
Sure. The vamp, as he describes her, is fully aware of the man's primary relationship status. She's often portrayed as aggressive, maybe actively pursuing him, and indifferent to the feelings of the wife or girlfriend.
Kind of cold-hearted and careless.
That's the language he uses, yeah. And he makes a key distinction. An innocent woman who is initially lied to only becomes a vamp in his definition if she continues the affair after she finds out the truth.
And why would she do that, according to him?
Reasons he suggests include maybe a perceived desperation due to a male shortage, or perhaps just a more liberal attitude towards casual, uncommitted sex, what he calls free love with a condom.
Okay, and the tramp, what's her profile?
The tramp, in his analysis, is chosen specifically because she's seen as subordinate and controllable. Often, he suggests, this stems from her having lower self-esteem.
So, easier to manage.
That's the idea. He asserts her main purpose is to satisfy his sexual needs and his ego. Most of their time together is apparently focused on sex or planning it.
He gives an example, right? Rodney.
Yeah, the example of Rodney, who, kind of incredibly, expected monogamy from his tramp while he was married. Baisden says he finds it hard to sympathize with women he sees settling for half a man in this way.
And his overall point is that men get very cocky because these roles are sometimes filled.
Yes, he uses some pretty strong language there, calling them sexual outhouses in this context. His argument is that women setting higher standards for themselves is really crucial if this dynamic is going to change.
Right. Let's shift to the practical side, the mechanics of cheating, the signs. Baisden describes the methods men use as often being kind of sloppy.
Yeah, he notes it frequently starts with a lie, maybe lying about wanting monogamy or a serious future just to secure the woman initially.
Get her hooked, basically.
Something like that. And once that's established, the inconsistency starts creeping in, which he flags as a major sign to watch out for.
Inconsistency, like what
That.
specifically?
Oh, he lists the classics.
Yep.
Suddenly working late, way more often, becoming cagey about you visiting his workplace, noticeable changes in appearance.
Like hitting the gym all of a sudden, new clothes.
Exactly. Hitting the gym, new underwear, maybe the wedding ring starts disappearing sometimes. Also, changes in overall attitude, habits, maybe even picking fights seemingly out of nowhere.
To create distance or an excuse?
Could be both. Create distance, or maybe create a false justification in his own mind, perhaps.
He mentions that infamous rule, just don't bring it home. What does he mean by that, specifically in the book?
As defined in the source, it means the other woman should never, ever contact a primary partner. She shouldn't know where he lives, certainly shouldn't be able to describe his house, or, heaven forbid, his bedroom.
Total separation, compartmentalization.
Exactly. The affair is meant to be kept entirely separate, invisible from his main life.
And the workplace often plays a role, as a location or an excuse.
Very much so. It's presented as the after-work getaway. It's just a convenient way to explain being gone for long hours without needing super elaborate lies about where you are.
Or sometimes the affair is literally at work.
That too, yeah, or starts there.
Baisden shares a really personal story, doesn't he? About someone named Terry checking up on him constantly.
He does. He recounts Carrie doing these unannounced visits, drive-bys, trying to catch him. His strategy, as he describes it, was to make his schedule totally unpredictable.
Ow.
He volunteered for rotating shifts at work, just so she couldn't pin down his routine and track him.
But she still found out.
Yeah. Despite his efforts, the story ends with him finding a note Terry left on his car windshield. It basically confirmed she knew he was seeing someone else. It's a pretty vivid story from his own past.
And the lesson he says he took from that, it's controversial.
It is. He
Uh-huh.
states quite bluntly that his takeaway from that specific experience was stand firm on your lies and never confess to anything.
Wow.
It's presented as a reflection on his past behavior, a provocative admission for sure within the context of the book.
Okay, let's flip the perspective. Baisden also talks about why women might tolerate cheating. He sometimes views them as silent witnesses.
Right. And the primary reason he puts forward for this tolerance is the fear of being alone.
That seems powerful.
He argues that this fear gives the cheating man significant leverage because the man knows or believes she's less likely to actually leave, even if she knows or strongly suspects what's going on.
He also suggests women often do know, or at least suspect, but choose to ignore the signs, maybe hoping he'll change.
Yeah, he touches on that. And he connects this to something he calls escaping labels.
Escaping labels, what's that?
His point is that women might put a label like husband or boyfriend on a man, and then they assume that label automatically includes monogamy.
Without actually talking about it.
Exactly, without having explicit conversations and clear agreements about boundaries. He suggests women often don't ask enough direct questions, maybe because they're afraid of scaring the man away, so they end up living with assumptions instead of clarity.
He found something related in his documentary work, right? About assumptions regarding single men.
Yes, he mentions finding that many women he interviewed just sort of assumed single men were celibate.
Really? Celibate?
Yeah. He frames this as a kind of classic case of living in denial, especially, he notes, when contrasted with the general belief many of these same women expressed, that a man is going to be a man or will sleep with anything with a hole in it.
Well, that's a big disconnect.
It is. The gap between that general cynicism and the specific assumption about their own situation or potential situations is something he really highlights as striking.
There's that anecdote he shares about the three friends, Denise, April, and Monica, discussing their cheating partners. That felt very real.
It's quite revealing. They shared different reasons for staying or putting up with it. Things like, not wanting the hassle of training another man or finding a weird predictability in his bad behavior. One says something like, he's my dog and he's predictable. They even touch on factors like the perceived limited availability of black men as part of their calculation.
And they had different ways of coping.
Right. Different strategies, like going on strike sexually, or one even mentions trying voodoo. He shows the range of reactions.
And one of them, Denise, has a realization about herself.
Yes, Denise comes to understand, as it's told in the book, that her own low self-esteem was actually a big factor in her situation and why she tolerated the infidelity for so long.
This whole discussion leads to a really interesting question Baisden raises. Do women really want the truth about infidelity?
It's a provocative question. He suggests that sometimes women might not want to hear the truth if it directly challenges the reality they've built or invested in.
Especially if there are kids or financial dependencies.
Exactly. Or if there's deeply invested emotionally. He argues that if the man is otherwise seen as, let's say, marginal, maybe the woman does want the truth as a clear reason to leave.
Why?
But if the relationship provides stability or fits her fantasy life, as he puts it, then the actual truth about infidelity can be seen as deeply inconvenient, something she'd rather not confront.
His story about the film festival illustrates this kind of perfectly.
It really does. He describes showing a film or clip where the audience, mostly women, cheered really loudly for the character advocating for marriage and monogamy. Standard stuff.
Right.
But when his own character was honest about wanting non-monogamy, wanting options, silence, or even disapproval, he uses that specific anecdote to conclude that, in his experience, women want honesty until you tell them something they don't want to hear.
So, okay, we've talked about the emotional pain. What are the other consequences of cheating that Baisden brings up in the book, the more tangible stuff?
He points to some really serious concrete risks.
Yeah.
STDs are a major one. He makes the point that men often stop using protection in long-term affairs because, they get comfortable, complacent.
That's incredibly risky for everyone involved.
Absolutely. Another consequence he mentions is getting the other woman pregnant. That leads to child support, obviously, but also the child becomes this constant, often unwelcome reminder of the affair.
And then there's the darker side he calls fatal attractions.
Yes, he touches on the potential for things to escalate really badly. Stalking, violence. Even in extreme cases, he notes, the murder of the primary partner by the mistress.
That's terrifying.
It is. And he adds that men often get emotionally entangled, too. They get caught up with the other woman, which just adds another layer of unpredictability and, frankly, dangerous complication to the whole situation.
So after laying all this out, the motivations, the types, the consequences, what are Baisden's final thoughts? What's the path forward, according to him in the book?
Well, he reflects that cheating ultimately brings, in his words, rude awakenings and hard lessons.
Yeah.
He's quite candid about acknowledging the damage caused by his own past lying and dishonesty.
He owns it then.
He seems to, yeah. Recognizing that men, through their deception, often effectively write the script for the drama and pain that follows. They create the conditions for the reactions they get from women.
And his ultimate conclusion is that honesty is the better way, despite how hard it might be.
Yes. He calls honesty the best game in the world. And a really key point he makes is this. If men want the option to see other women, they absolutely must be prepared for women to want and take the same options for themselves.
Equality in options.
Exactly. And he argues, based on his observations, that men are often more possessive, more insecure about the idea of sharing their partners than women actually are.
Interesting. So his final advice, especially to young men, is based on this idea of honesty.
Very direct advice. He advises them to just be upfront from day one. Be honest about who you are, what kind of relationship you're looking for, and who else you might be seeing.
Lay it all out there.
Right. His argument is that this approach actually empowers women by giving them a real choice based on truth. It avoids, or should avoid, a lot of the drama and hurt down the line, and fundamentally maintains a level of respect, even if the relationship isn't traditional monogamy.
And he brings up open relationships explicitly.
He does. He notes that, in practice, many relationships are already effectively non-monogamous, just through denial and deception.
So stop pretending.
Basically, he suggests that open, honest conversations about non-monogamy as a potential agreed-upon option are necessary. He argues that avoiding that conversation primarily benefits the man who wants to cheat and really disadvantages the woman who's kept in the dark.
Wow. That was quite the deep dive into the perspectives laid out in Michael Baisden's Do Men Know What They Want? Never Satisfied Second Edition. We've really covered a lot, his views on why men cheat, the dynamics with the other woman, the signs why women might tolerate it, the whole truth dilemma.
Right, and the pretty serious consequences leading up to his final call for honesty, however uncomfortable that might be.
And it's crucial, as you said earlier, to remember we've been exploring the landscape of relationships and infidelity as depicted in this specific source. These are the views and experiences presented within Baisden's book.
Exactly. It's one author's perspective based on his research and life.
It definitely leaves us, and hopefully you listening, with a lot to think about. Given all the complexities we discussed, all the potential downsides laid out in the source, and the author's eventual argument that honesty is the best, maybe the only truly respectful approach. Well, what does this tell us?
What does it suggest about the standards we should maybe hold? Or the kinds of conversations we really need to be having in our relationships right from the start?
Yeah. Does understanding what this source claims men and women do in these situations change how you think about what men and women should do? Or maybe, what does real honesty actually require from everyone involved in a relationship?
Definitely something to mull over.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.